In June 2009, the Canadian Pope was asked about which three things he would want to take with him to a deserted island if he knew he'd be stranded there for many years to come. The Pope said, "I will take 3 copies of Digimon World 1 with me." The interviewer, horribly confused, asked, "But why, sir? Surely 1 copy would be enough. Wouldn't it be wiser to take iconic games like Grand Theft Auto Vice City or Duke Nukem 3D with you as well?" To which the Pope replied, "You wouldn't get it." Well, that's all quite understandable if you ask me. Most high IQ people believe that Digimon World 1 is not just a video game, but a piece of art. It has a mysterious, wondrous world that's just waiting to be explored. It's unlikely you would be able to see everything that there is to see after only 1 playthrough, making future runs even more fun, especially when you consider that you can train, feed, and love a completely different Digimon every time, meaning each playthrough can end up feeling quite unique. Now, can you do that in Grand Theft Auto? I don't think so. But even though there are a lot of options when it comes to Digimon, not all of them were created equal. Most of them are alright, while some Digimon are incredibly powerful. But then there are others, which are a bit too disappointing. Keep in mind though that you could beat the game with any Digimon you like. Heck, speedrunners of Digimon World 1 usually beat the final boss with their first champion. But maybe you wanna play some competitive PvP with your totally real and not imaginary girlfriend. Maybe you wanna know what Digimon you should avoid. Or maybe you just wanna know who the worst Digimon in the game are. Either way, I've got your back. Well, I hope you've got 31.4 liters of Pepsi ready to go, cause we're about to take a look into the 5 worst Digimon of Digimon World 1. Okay, so before we begin, let's talk about the criteria that I'll be using to judge these Digimon. There are a couple of gameplay related factors that help determine the overall power level of a Digimon. The most important one is the move pool. When it comes to attacks, there are 3 things that matter: how quickly the move activates, how hard it is to interrupt, and what kind of status effect it inflicts. Some moves look really amazing, but are actually terrible. The most common example of that is DG Dimension. Looks crazy, has massive power too, but it takes too long to go off, and can be easily interrupted by faster attacks. Not to mention that it's quite expensive MP-wise as well. It would be fine in casual play, but if we're looking at things from a somewhat competitive point of view, then yeah, it's kinda trash. Ultimate Poop Hell is another example. Looks brilliant, a thing of beauty some would say, but it's very easy to stop, cause it takes an eternity to animate. And then there is the fact that while there are a couple of different Digimon that can learn this move, only Numemon are capable of using it properly. Why is that the case? Well, let's just say that it's a special hidden mechanic, unique only to the greatest Digimon ever created, Numemon. On a side note, there aren't too many non-offensive moves that are worthwhile, but the ones that are decent tend to buff stats in some way. Moves like Muscle Charge are alright, but there is one that's really good that I'll get to in a moment. Anyway, every Digimon has a unique move pool. While there are a lot of moves in the game, just like the Digimon we'll talk about in a bit, some of them are significantly better than others. And a Digimon's viability really depends on whether or not they have access to these ultra powerful moves. Let me take a moment to talk about them and tell you why they're so special. Ice Statue is an ice type attack. Who could have predicted that? It is perhaps the most broken move in the whole game. It activates and comes out ridiculously fast, and has an obnoxiously high chance of causing stun. Stun basically stuns the opposing Digimon for a while. Although a lot of moves can cause stun, the sheer speed at which Ice Statue comes out puts it in a different league. You could perpetually stunlock the opponent if you get lucky. It's an absolutely busted move, and the Digimon who have it are automatically top tier. Next up is Megalospark, also known as Megalospank, which is an air type attack. It is essentially very similar to Ice Statue, except that it's a bit worse. It has less power and it's a teensy bit slower as well, but it still has the capacity to do some degenerate stun locking. So it's a great move to have if Ice Statue isn't an option. Thunder Justice, another air-type attack, has a ton of power behind it. It's a bit slow but quite difficult to interrupt, although it can be dodged if the opposing Digimon just moves out of the way. It also has the potential to cause stun, because yeah, stun is amazing, but that extra power packs a pretty mean punch. Let's just say that no Digimon would like to be hit in the groin with this attack. Bug might not sound like much, but it is every bit as degenerate as any of the other moves, if not more. This one doesn't cause stun. Instead, it can cause flat, which basically reduces the afflicted Digimon to an 8-bit sprite, which can't really do anything until the effect wears off. But Bug is a bit different from the other attacks, in a disgusting way. It not only homes in on the opposing Digimon, but it can also hit multiple times. Attacks can be blocked in this game if a Digimon is defending. It's not a guarantee, but a blocked attack does nothing. The thing is, because Bug hits multiple times, it can just power through a Digimon's block, unless it somehow blocks all the hits, which is very unlikely. So if a Digimon has Bug, it's definitely gonna cause some problems in battle. The last big move that I want to talk about is Full Potential. Like I said before, there are a couple of good buff type moves in this game, but Full Potential beats them all in terms of effectiveness. It increases your stats by a lot. Simple, but very powerful. Besides these crazy busted moves, there are a few others that are quite strong as well. All Range Beam is very nifty, as it is very difficult to avoid. Not impossible, but it's a reliable attack still. It doesn't have a special effect, which is unfortunate, but what can you do? Meltdown is another interesting attack. It seems really slow, but it's not exactly easy to interrupt, cause even if the Digimon gets blasted during the animation, the attack still goes off most of the time. While these are decent attacks, they can't really compare to something like Ice Statue, but that goes without saying. And finally, I personally have a soft spot for the ultra-fast poke-type attacks. Attacks like Poison Claw and Danger Sting may not have fancy animations and they may not deal much damage, but they are stupidly fast and they can be spammed quite easily. Poison, by the way, is deadly in this game because it never freaking wears off. If you get it online early, then all that chip damage will definitely add up over time. Danger Sting can flatten the enemy, which can be very effective, obviously. Let's just say that there aren't too many Digimon who would like to be stung in the groin with Danger Sting over and over. So those are all the cool, fancy moves in the game. Besides the move pool, there are a few other factors that need to be considered as well. The simplest one is the literal size of the Digimon. Some Digimon, like Skull Greymon, are big and chunky, meaning they are easier to hit with attacks. A Digimon's hitbox, which is an invisible outline that determines what part of them can be affected by an enemy's attack, is relative to their actual size. A Digimon like Gyromon would be harder to hit because it's so small. Quite literally, smaller is always better in Digimon World 1. A Digimon's finisher can also play a role in determining how strong they are. Most finishers in the game are alright, nothing too strong or too useless. But there are a couple of finishers in the game that are just ew. If a Digimon has an ew finisher, then it immediately loses a lot of points for me. One other thing I may consider is how difficult a Digimon is to get. Some Digivolutions do require a lot more effort than others, after all. If a Digimon is a pain to get and is bad as well, then that's just not okay with me. With all that out of the way, let's talk about the 5 worst Digimon in the game. For the 5th spot, I'm actually gonna put a couple of different Digimon here together. Sukamon is, without any doubt, the worst Digimon in the game. The reason it's at the number 5 spot though, is because it's intended to be a terrible Digimon. Kinda like a punishment for the player for being a bad tamer. The only way to get a Sukamon is to let your partner poop all over the place. This will slowly fill up the virus meter, and eventually, once the meter is maxed out, your Digimon will digivolve into the manifestation of poop itself. It doesn't even matter what stage your Digimon is. It could be a freaking ultimate, and it will still turn into a Sukamon. Now, the gross aesthetics aren't the only problem here. You see, digivolving into a Sukamon also triggers a nasty special effect. all of your partner's stats are reduced by 50%. Even the stats you gain from training are reduced. Yeah, that's adding some serious insult to injury. We don't even really need to talk about this thing's moveset, cause what the heck are you gonna do with the moves with that stat penalty? But if you really wanna know, it has access to all the filth techniques. But everyone knows that a Numemon is the only Digimon in the game that can use them like they were meant to be used. But if you do find yourself with a Sukamon, it's not the end of the world. If you're not a fan of Sukamon, you could just go and talk to King Sukamon in Trash Mountain and have him turn your partner back to its original form. On a side note, there's a little trick you can do with this whole King Sukamon thing. Let's say you have an ultimate level Digimon who turned into a Sukamon. If you have King Sukamon reverse the Digivolution, you actually gain some extra lifespan out of it. It's a weird oversight, I believe, but it's in your favor. While that is kinda nifty, we need to talk about Sukamon here on its own merit. And at the end of the day, it's terrible. But it's supposed to be terrible, which is why it's so low on the list. Although not anywhere near as bad as Sukamon, I'm gonna put Nanimon in this spot too. Because, well, it's Nanimon. Look at it. But honestly, if you naturally end up with this creepy bald man thing, then you should really reconsider your training methods, and perhaps everything else too. Because there is only one proper way to get it. You need to treat your rookie partner with unrelenting hate and animosity. You have to act like a monster towards it. You have to treat it like dirt. In fact, you have to treat it worse than dirt. If you successfully manage to traumatize your rookie partner to the point where both the happiness and discipline meters hit zero, then all you have to do is scold it one more time to push it over the edge, straight into the abyss of insanity, where it will digivolve into Nanimon. While there aren't any stat reductions or stuff like that, Nanimon's existence would be a constant reminder of the horrible things that were done to get it. In terms of moves, Nanimon doesn't even have access to the ultimate poop hell, which is just depressing. Here's a fun fact. Nanimon can only digivolve naturally into one ultimate. That's it, just one. And here's a tiny spoiler. That ultimate is also on this list. It's crazy that Numemon is often associated with these two, but it's arguably one of the best Digimon in the game. Why? Because it has the power of GG Gaming inside it. GG Gaming is a secret hidden power-up that only Numemon has access to, allowing it to do heroic deeds. If you don't want to take my word for it, well, there's plenty of proof on my channel to back up that claim, so feel free to check it out. With the garbage out of the way, the other 4 picks are all ultimate level Digimon. I'll have old McLean here form change into them to show you how depressing they are. Yes, that's obviously something a Numemon can do. In addition, I'll have them duke it out with a Machine Dramon in the arena, just to see how they stack up against the ultimate enemy. Although I doubt it's gonna go well. Now then, the 4th worst Digimon in the game is the fan favorite Metal Greymon. Yeah, that's probably gonna come as a shock to some people. How could Metal Greymon be bad? I'm sure you're thinking. Well, he might be cute and sexy, but there are a couple of big problems with the big guy. Let's begin with the move pool. The good news is that it does have access to full potential, which is a pretty big deal. It also has all range beam and meltdown, so there is some offense there as well. But that's about it. No ice statue or any of the other degenerate moves here, which means that Metal Greymon fights in a very honest way. Too honest to be one of the best Digimon in the game, unfortunately. DG Dimension is simply not gonna cut it. To add on to that, Metal Greymon is a very thick, chonky boy. He's so massive that he can't help but get hit by practically everything. It's gonna be very hard to evade attacks when you have to move all that thickness around. To make matters worse, it's not exactly easy to get a Metal Greymon. The stat requirements are quite high, so unless you're using a guide, you're much more likely to end up with something else, like an Andromon or maybe a Gyromon, both of which are a lot easier to digivolve into. In fact, they would both be better to get anyway. Andromon has access to Megalospark, in addition to full potential, and Gyromon has Thunder Justice, along with full potential. Gyromon also has the added advantage of being tiny and hard to hit. Sure, it has a terrible finisher, but the good kinda outweighs the bad here, I would say. Metal Greymon's finisher is perfectly adequate. It deals a whole bunch of damage, but I don't think it's enough to compensate for all the shortcomings. So overall, Metal Greymon is an okay Digimon that is outclassed by other machine types, which are not only easier to get, but also more effective in battle. It definitely looks very cool, but that's not gonna be enough when the fecal matter hits the fan, and a hero is needed to save the day. Going into the arena with Machine Dramon didn't work out too well for Metal Greymon. Machine Dramon hammered the poor thing with a relentless barrage of Thunder Justice. Once the stun kicked in, Metal Greymon could only watch as the big bad machine ripped him apart, slowly and painfully. It kept fighting for as long as it could, but eventually it was put out of its suffering, with a few seconds left on the clock. Hey, it tried. We have to give it points for that. Not too many points, but let's give it a 3 out of 10. Anyway, for the number 3 spot, we have Mamemon. For those of you who don't know, Mamemon is supposed to be the canon partner of the protagonist of this game. You can even see it pop out of their Digivice in the ending. With that in mind, you'd think that the developers would make Mamemon amazing, but obviously that is not the case. Let's start with the move pool. It's got full potential. And that's it, folks. Okay, sure, it does have access to the entire assortment of the battle type moves, but battle attacks aren't really good. Many of them are quite easy to avoid, and the payoffs aren't really there. So even though Mamemon does have full potential, it doesn't really have the potential to be great, because it doesn't have access to any super strong attacks. There's only one useful thing that Mamemon has, and that's the fact that he's a small boy. So it will have an easier time avoiding incoming attacks. But really, when it comes to tiny Digimon, Piximon and Gyromon completely invalidate Mamemon's existence. We've already talked about Gyromon, but Piximon is an absolute unit with an amazing move pool. Piximon is just as easy to get as Mamemon, but with such a significantly higher upside that there's never gonna be a reason that you'll be happy to get a Mamemon. Unless you're a fan of how it looks, I guess. Ninjamon can digivolve into either Mamemon or Piximon, and I can't really imagine why I would go for Mamemon given the choice. As far as the finisher goes, it's alright, nothing amazing or terrible. It hits kinda hard, I guess. Still, pretty boring, to be honest. Basically, if you're looking for a strong Digimon, there are much better options. And if you're in the market for a small, tiny Digimon, there are still far better options than this thing. If the fate of the world was at stake, unlike the protagonist, I wouldn't feel comfortable about putting my hopes and dreams on the non-existent shoulders of a Mamemon. But if you're a mega fan of the aesthetic design, then you might be more willing to gloss over the many flaws here. For me though, it doesn't even have the coolness factor of Metal Greymon, so all things considered, I'm just gonna stay the heck away from it. Moving on, we're gonna stay pretty close to Mamemon, because at number 2, we have Metal Mamemon. As bad as Mamemon is, the metal version somehow found a way to be even worse. Let's take a look at the move pool, shall we? It's got battle moves just like Mamemon, but no full potential. Instead, it has access to all range beam. Why the diddly is that the case? What did the developers mean by this? You'd think that the metal coating would make things better, but apparently not. It's not metal enough to have full potential. You know what? It's super weird though. This thing does not have any redeemable qualities at all. In terms of stats, it requires more work to get than Mamemon. Both Frigimon and Ninjamon can digivolve into either one. But why would you want them to turn into this guy? Here's something else that's just bizarre. Metal Mamemon's finisher, the Energy Bomb, has less base power than Mamemon's Smiley Bomb. What the frick? Did the metal armor actually make it worse in every way? As a kid, I always thought that the metal versions of Digimon were inherently superior to the non-metal ones, like Metal Greymon, Metal Garurumon, and Metal Seadramon. But for some strange reason, in Digimon World 1 at the very least, Metal Mamemon got actively weaker when it put on the armor, it seems. It's still small though, so there's that. But I'm really scraping the bottom of the barrel here, to try and find some way to say some nice things about this pitiful thing. Objectively speaking, most champions are probably better than the Mamemon duo. And as for the battle between this thing and Machinedramon, it somehow put in an even worse performance than the Mamemon. At least the normal Mamemon survived the fight. The shiny boy got absolutely dunked on, and ended up unconscious on the floor with over 12 seconds left on the clock. Yikes, that thing ain't saving anyone, let alone the world. And that brings us to my number 1 pick. What could possibly be worse than the armor-wearing fraud, you may be wondering? Well, there's one Digimon who, I believe, deserves the number 1 spot. After you beat the game by destroying Machinedramon in Mount Infinity, you could, if you wanted to, make your way back to Mount Infinity and climb all the way to the top where Analog Man was fought. If you go to the final room again, you'll find a new opponent waiting for you, Digitamamon. It's a relatively tough fight, because this is like the secret boss of the game, basically. After you win, it thinks about destroying the main character, but decides to join the city instead, where it ends up working in the restaurant. Nifty! And if you fell in love with this Digimon at first sight, then you're in luck, because you can get a Digitamamon of your own. Remember how I said that Nanimon could only digivolve into one ultimate? Well, that's Digitamamon. Why does Nanimon do that? Who knows what the diddly is going on there? In the final room, the protagonist mentions that it could be Machinedramon's egg or something. Does that mean Nanimon is somehow connected to Machinedramon? Well, I suppose that's just a theory. A Nanimon theory. But you know what's not a theory though? Digitamamon is, in my opinion, the worst Digimon in the game. Let's get into why I think that is. Taking a look at the move pool might make you think that I've finally lost my mind. I'm sure you're thinking, it's got Megalospark and Thunder Justice. That seems amazing. Not to mention that it doesn't even have a huge frame. So what the heck is Editor Man talking about? Has playing too much Digimon World 2 finally done some irreversible brain damage? Well, I don't know, it might have, but let me explain. I mentioned earlier that a Digimon's finisher can have an impact on how viable it is. Gyromon is great, except for the fact that it has a really wonky finisher, which will probably let you down in the heat of battle. But as terrible as that finisher might be, it is godlike when compared to the insanity of Digitamamon's finisher, which is known as the Nightmare Syndromer. At first glance, everything seems relatively okay. A bit strange, but nothing else. A weird ghost comes out of Digitamamon and starts wandering around the battlefield. Eventually, it homes in on the enemy and explodes, dealing a hefty chunk of damage. That looks pretty good, I think most people would agree. Everything seems okay, right? Well, let me tell you that everything is not okay. 'Cause here is how this finisher works. Whenever Digitamamon uses it, there is a good chance that the exploding ghost will come after Digitamamon instead of the enemy. That's right, this creepy egg's finisher can just hurt itself. I don't think there's any other Digimon in the whole game whose finisher does that. Gyromon's finisher might be depressing, but this is taking things to a whole new, depressingly degenerate level. So you can't really rely on Digitamamon in a tough fight, cause its finisher might just help the opponent by exploding in the egg's face. I'm not exactly sure about the likelihood of it occurring, but from my testing, it seems like there's a solid 50% chance of the exploding ghost coming after Digitamamon. Can you imagine being in a battle which might determine the fate of the world, and your partner decides to send itself to the Shadow Realm? I would probably break the controller if that happened to me. So yeah, that is why, for me, Digitamamon deserves the number 1 spot as the worst Digimon in the game. It did alright in the test battle versus Machinedramon, but that was probably because the AI can't use finishers without a player's input. Funnily enough, while that clause might hinder every other Digimon, it actively helps Digitamamon. Still, it couldn't save the world. I suppose the egg wasn't able to surpass the alleged father this time. And there you go. Those are the top 5-ish worst Digimon in the game, in my humble opinion. Do you agree with the list? Or do you think I missed a Digimon that should have been here instead of one of my choices? How do you feel about Nightmare Syndromer? Which do you think came first, the egg or Machine Dramon? Do let me know everything in the comments. Well, after spending all that time with these horrible Digimon, I'm gonna play with the best Digimon in the game for a while. Take care of yourselves, everyone. Stay away from Nanimon, and I'll see you all next time. Bye bye!